Well, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and those of you that are able, please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Pape,
Here.
Councilmember Shavetta,
Here.
Councilmember Hands,
Here.
Councilmember Caldwell,
Here.
Councilmember Leahy,
Here.
Councilmember Neal,
Here.
Councilmember Ryder,
Here.
Councilmember Silvers,
Here.
Councilmember Yodridge.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, first item up is public items. Members of the public are encouraged to use this time to make comments and about matters that do not appear on the agenda. Comments about items on the regular agenda will be taken up as each item is considered. Please note that individuals have 5 minutes that they can comment on or be limited to 5 minutes. We did have a sign-up sheet, and we have a couple people that have signed up. This preclude others at the end of this to also come forward. But looks like we have Mr. Rick Williams would like to come forward to the podium. Please give your name and address and for the records.
Good evening. My name is Rick Williams. I've been doing business in beautiful downtown Merriam long before it became even remotely beautiful. I moved my business here in 1987, became one of the partners in KC Strings in 1992, and developed my own business, again, R.C. Williams Company in 10 years ago. 11 years ago. Anyway, my concern is I've been through all of the changes that improved in downtown, and what I see coming and what I saw in the drawings that I saw that were sent out. First, I thought they were somebody's fantasy and they couldn't take place because it's so stupid. But the idea of changing the traffic patterns to what they're talking about doing is potentially going to put us in a situation of total chaos down there, because I've been there before they made the changes to what it is now. Traffic down there was a nightmare, especially at rush hour, especially if a train was going by. And what they're gonna do is just make it that much harder for people who are operating down there to operate down there. There's a lot of ins and outs, a lot of turnoffs very close to that intersection. And I see nothing but trouble as a result of it. So apparently, a lot of businesses have been surprised to find out about the fact that this is apparently going forward as planned, rather than somebody coming down and taking the time and paying attention to the fact that these people who have businesses have objections to what is being planned to do. And I know I'm not the only one, and at least I'm not right on the drive there. But I mean, you can only go so far to escape the traffic when it's 2 miles down Merriam Drive and Kessler's stuck with the train and you can't get in or out, and road rage develops and you lose your mind. So I think it's important to do your best to pay attention. I would suggest getting down there and talking to the people who actually are in those businesses down there and finding out how it's going to affect them when that traffic starts to back up like it does, especially if there's something on the highway that causes a problem. Former president or past president of Downtown Merriam Partnership, I think we have our own problems and some house cleaning that needs to be done there, because I don't think some of that communication is getting out of there to the city the way it should. And the true concerns of the members of that organization are being heard. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Okay, it looks like the next person up would be Mr. Kritz. Kritz? Kritz. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Anton Kreutz, and just to reiterate a little bit what Rick said when we were partners, some of you may not know, but
For
in
our
the,
record, sir, give your address too.
Anton Kreutz at 5842 Merriam Drive, Casey Strings. So,
Thank you.
but in the mid to late 1990s, we bought the retail building that we are in now, and completely gutted it, renovated it, and we worked closely with the then Mayor Irene French and the City Council in how we were going to do that. And one of the reasons we did that is because the citizens of Merriam could see that, hey, nice things can happen on Merriam Drive. And based on that, and citizens seeing that, Mayor French felt comfortable in putting up a proposal for a sales tax increase for Merriam Drive at that time in 2000, and it passed because they saw things could be happening there. And after that, you could just look at the way things moved, and then there's renovations in, you know, where the malls are, and then across the street where Circuit City and now IKEA. So, but if you look at the beginning of the change, it started with Casey Strings. So we're not, you know, averse to change. We were leading it. But this change of taking out the middle lane is absolutely nonsensical. It is counterproductive to the flow of traffic. I went to the display where they were displaying the new plans, and I talked to the lead engineer, and I asked him, I said, do you understand what this will do to the traffic and to the traffic jam? And he had a flippant answer of, oh, it'll delay it a little bit. That's not a scientific answer. That's absolutely unacceptable. Because is it a delay at 1 o'clock in the afternoon when there's a few cars? Or is it delay when we have backup, as is now, sometimes past Hawker all the way to the farmer's market? Because in the plan that is present, imagine this. You have one lane, and there's cars and buses that must turn left, and so there's only one lane that's straight and left. So southbound traffic is stopped. And now there's northbound traffic that needs to take a left, either into ours or another for the driveways or roads that are in the immediate area in Merriam Drive. And now northbound traffic is stopped. That's called complete and total traffic gridlock. And for engineers not to understand this is at minimum incomplete analysis to at most incompetence. Because that fact that you have people turning left all the time, and the fact that you have people that are going down southbound that needs to take a left on Johnson Drive, that happens all the time now. And there's the line on the left turn lane going east on Johnson Drive is always full, and then people go, you know, they could keep going straight. So without having a middle turn lane, you're going to have absolute traffic gridlock at certain times. So it doesn't matter that the analysis they did was great at 9 in the morning and 1 o'clock in the afternoon and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you have traffic gridlock that's there at least half the time, you have a problem. And when I approached businesses to see if they knew about this, they all looked at me like I'm just completely BSing them. Like, there's no way the city of Merriam is going to take out the third lane. I said, oh yeah, that's the proposal. And we looked at the site, and there it was. And so that's why in the email that you saw, there was a petition, and those are just the businesses that were there immediately being most affected. But I went businesses all the way down the line, including the bus business. And again, you know, I talked to the people there, and they're going, you're kidding me. They're proposing to take out. I mean, if you want to see buses backed up for miles, you're gonna see it. In the end, what you're trying to do as a city, and again, we've been there, so I can understand this. It's not just speaking theoretically. We've been there. We've been at the forefront of this. Is you're trying to make Merriam Drive more inviting, more attractive to businesses, to people. Okay, but in the end, that's not the result that you're going to get. You're going to get the result that's going to be inconvenient, unsafe, and then if it's going to be detrimental to the business day in and day out, week in and week out, it's going to be destructive to the businesses on Merriam Drive. So you need to communicate with the businesses for something that important. And I understand that, you know, there's some issues with parking and people want parking, and that'd be nice to have, all businesses, all they want, some aspect, and so a little more parking here and there is fine. But that's something that'd be nice to have. The middle lane is a critical aspect of proper traffic flow. It's critical. There's no two ways about it. So if you want more parking or this or that, there could be land that you could buy. You could turn that to parking. You could do many things. In the 2000s, the council and the mayor at that time they bought certain areas and then made that into other other businesses, sold that, and so that can be a possibility. But taking out the middle lane, you can't make that change and not think it's going to be detrimental. And again, I would really love to see the traffic studies done there, because Shawnee, did beautiful reworking of their Neiman Road from Johnson Drive to Shawnee Mission Parkway, third turn lane, right? So it's I think part of every city that has a major intersection, and Merriam Drive, Johnson Drive has unique things that I don't think anywhere exists anywhere in Kansas. You have buses going back and forth. You have a train. You have a highway right there. You have two major shopping centers and IKEA. And you think 2 lanes is going to cut it? Come on. There's a real issue with the analysis on the engineering traffic side that no other engineering firm would do for any other city.
Thank you, Mr. Kritz. Okay, that's the only 2 individuals that I had currently signed up. That does not preclude anyone else in the audience from coming forward at this time. If you'd like to speak on any subject matter please come forward, ma'am. Thank you. And again, give your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name's Rose Geringer. I live at 9931 West 56th Street, which is just west of Farley. There's been a lot of construction on 55th Street, and over the past 30 days, I'd say we had street lights working about a third of the time, about 10 days. And I often call and leave messages on my way to work from at the City Works, Public Works office, and sometimes they come on the next light. Sometimes we were without the long holiday weekend. It was very dark in our cul-de-sac. So tonight we left the house, came back and saw our street had street lights on, but not the Farley north of 56th Street and not 55th Street. And I understand it could be part of the construction. I thought, well, maybe they've switched them over to solar, which is pretty unreliable, so it's dark, or maybe it's just a rolling blackout here in Merriam. But in any case, it would be nice to have working street lights and not have to call Public Works every day. But that's my only thing that I wanted to bring for the council tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Geringer. And I see our street superintendent heard every word of that, so thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? See no one heading to the podium, so I guess we will close out the public meeting. Okay, the next item up is our consent agenda. All items listed under this heading are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which case that item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separate. Is there anyone that would like to have any item removed from the consent agenda? See nothing that way. Anyone down there? Okay, I see nothing that anybody wants anything removed. I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Hands.
I move that the council approve the consent agenda as presented, and that's items 1 through 4.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Okay, Ms. Shadrich.
Mr. Mayor, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next item up is the mayor's report. Several things under the mayor's report. which isn't listed on the agenda, but a couple things that's been going on anyway. We like to stay busy here in Merriam. I attended the Johnson County, Wyandotte County Council of Mayors dinner, which was and we met with the state legislators at the Monarchs facility out at the Legends. If you've never been out there, it's very nice. I recommend going out there. I also attended a first meeting of our Flags for Freedom Committee, and we're actually looking forward this year to having the American Legion band's going to be there on the 4th, hopefully. I mean, that's what we're anticipating anyway. And we'll have food trucks and other things will be happening there. And anybody who wants to attend those meetings, see me afterwards, and we can get you on that committee. But I and Chris Hands attended the Johnson County Commissioner Ed Eilert's retirement. I think we were the only ones there, Merriam. Believe, okay. But Ed Eilert, as those of you in the audience may or know or not know, has had like 45 years of public service. He'd been the Overland Park mayor for 24 years and had served as the Johnson County Commissioner for a number of years after that. But he has retired and did not seek re-election, and Mike Kelly's going to be our new commissioner. But very nice gathering that we went to. I don't know, I think we may be too late for this one. I talked to the chief this evening, but there's a Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebration that's going to be going on. The NAACP is celebrating that on January 16th. I know the police department and I are attending. I don't know if you can still get into that if you want to attend that meeting coming up on the 16th. But if so, reach out to Jennifer, and the chief's going to let them know whether we can still get anyone else in on that. The Northeast Chamber of Commerce is hosting the State of the Cities address. That's going to be on January 18th at 11 a.m., and that will be at the Marriott. Contact Jennifer, I think, for that as well. If you haven't signed up for that at this point itself, everybody's welcome to attend. We usually get a table there, and all the cities get a chance to talk about all the great things that's been going on. And of course, we have a lot of stuff that we're doing in Merriam, and we're real proud to get out there and share that news with the other cities. Not to make them look bad, but we're doing fine. Then the first suburbs meeting is going to occur on January 20th at 8:30 a.m. to 10:30. That's a Zoom meeting, so if you want to attend that by Zoom, probably information from Jennifer. She can give you that information as well, too, on the suburb meeting. We're meeting with the legislators in Topeka. This is for the council itself. That will be happening on January 25th. Contact Jennifer if you plan to attend. We usually carpool up there and meet with our state legislators at noontime in Topeka. So if you haven't signed up for that, or please let her know so we at least know how many people to try to get in the car. We're not taking mine, so it's the record. So. And then we also have sent off this week a letter to the Lieutenant Governor Tolan requesting additional ARPA funds for our Turkey Creek and our flooding problems that we're having down there. There may be some additional monies that are available, and Jennifer put together a really nice letter for that, and I got to sign it. So, but we'll see whether we get any additional revenue from that. But that's kind of some of the things that have been going on in my realm of the world and for the council as well. Okay, so let's moving on to council items. And the first one I think we have is consider approval of an ordinance amending sections 8154 of the Merriam Code of Ordinance related to the maximum number of dogs allowed. Who's going to be handling that from staff? Is that?
I will, Mayor, but I'm going to present from over here, if that's okay.
Sure,
Yep.
that'd be fine. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Okay, good evening. So the item before you tonight is to consider approval of an ordinance amending Section 8-154 of the Merriam Code. This section of the code sets the maximum number of dogs allowed at 3, but it also provides exceptions to that 3-dog limit. Recently, a resident contacted the city to ask for an exception to Section 8-154. The resident currently has 3 dogs registered and did explain the unique circumstances for requesting the exception to obtain the 4th dog. 1 dog is a pet. There are 2 other dogs that are specially trained FEMA live detection dogs. These dogs are deployed in disaster situations, building searches, and wide area searches for missing persons. Due to the age of 1 of the FEMA dogs, it's being retired from service, but will remain at the residence as a pet. So the resident would like to begin training a new dog for deployment. This would make a total of 4 dogs at this residence. As staff and the resident kind of reviewed the code to see, surely there would be an exception for this type of situation, but there was not. So we reached out to our city attorney for some recommendations on how to accommodate this request. And he suggested adding 2 words to the code, fire dogs. Very simple way to make this happen. Police dogs were currently in there as an exception, but fire dogs were not. So that would be our recommendation, to include fire dogs. Now, just because you claim a fire dog doesn't mean you just get the exception automatically. We won't have people up here with the Dalmatians saying, hey, I have a fire dog. Obviously, we would ask for verification. This resident did provide that verification that these dogs are highly special trained dogs and that they're currently working with a FEMA group to provide this service to the community. All other, section of that code would still apply. They would have to get vaccinations. They would still have to register the dog. It just wouldn't count toward the maximum number allowed. So tonight is just the first reading. Council could waive the first reading if they choose, or we could bring it back in 2 weeks. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, I'd just like to go on record that, if the police can have a dog, then the fire department ought to be able to have a dog. All right, Chief. So, there we go. Okay, so, does anyone have any questions for Ms. Bendick? Okay, I see no, go ahead. Ms.
I'm wondering
Aldridge.
if the council would be open to waiving the first reading.
Well, I see head nods.
Okay.
Would you like to?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we waive the first reading.
Okay, we have a motion to waive the first reading. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Neal.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. With that, then I would entertain a motion for, okay. Okay.
Take it.
Okay, Ms. Yodrich,
Figure I'll
to
handle it
approve the
all.
ordinance, go ahead.
All right, Mr. Mayor. Oh, where are we? Dogs, dogs, dogs. All right. We don't have a motion for it.
Yeah, this
did?
one over here, I think is going to be that.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Oh, there it is. It's all the way
Okay,
down there.
there you go.
I got it. Okay.
Okay, we're good.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we consider an approval of the ordinance amending Section 8-154 of the Merriam Code of Ordinance related to maximum number of dogs allowed exceptions.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second? Ms. Hands.
And I'll second that.
A motion is second. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, well, moving on then. It looks like our next item up is consider the approval or purchase of real property located at 9224 West 57th. And I see Mr. Engel is approaching the podium.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Next item is consider approval of purchase of real property located at 9224 West 57th Street. The property at 9224 West 57th Street is located in historic downtown to the, really it's at the southernmost edge of what we would call historic downtown. It's to the north of the 5701 city-owned property. It used to be the community center. Thank you. Do I have control of that? You have control of it. I'll have to remember what the slides are. For many, 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 many years, it functioned as the First Church of Christian Scientists, which was a local branch of the larger Christian Scientist Church based out of Boston. Unfortunately, due to a lack of membership, that church has had to merge with the neighboring community's church. And they have the process of they have to dissolve those assets and they have to sell them off, or they have to transfer them back to what they call the mother church. Because of a relationship that they have with the city over the years, and I think for a desire to see that that property is protected and put to the highest best use, they reached out to the city and said that they would be interested in offering the property up for purchase to the city prior to transferring it back to the mother church. They do not intend to put it on the market. If the city's not interested in the property, they will just transfer it back to the mother church, and we would assume the mother church would go through some sort of process to put it on the market. So we have discussed this item in executive session before, so what I thought I'd do is just go through a summary of the conversations that we had in executive session, just so we, as a refresher of all of these facts. This is the property that we're looking at. This is looking north on Merriam Drive. This is to the northeast. Looking at the property, the next slide is what they call the reading room. It is a add-on building that was added on the original church. Next. The original church was built in 1922. The reading room was put in 1950. Again, then it was vacated in 2022. It's on 0.5 acres located on the corner up there at Zone C2. So if someone were to purchase that property, they would be able to do all of the things that are allowable in C2. It wouldn't require any zoning. So just for an example, those would be automobile sales, service type of things that are already in that area. The comp plan 2040 shows that property as perhaps needing to be purchased for the realignment of the street. The core also shows that property might need to be realigned with, if the bridge needs to be realigned as part of the Upper Turkey Creek mitigation project. We don't know if either of those things will happen, but those things do exist. The appraisal, we had an appraisal on it. The appraisal came back at $400,000. This property has never been on the market, so we don't know what the market would bear in terms of cost. But $400,000 is what the appraisal, the result of the appraisal, which is in the packet. Again, it's never been on the market. The roof, in terms of current state of it, the roof would probably be a priority. It's not leaking currently, but it's an old roof. Then somewhere down the road, in the foreseeable future, we would need to replace the HVAC. Again, we need a decision now, just simply because we need to let them know if we're not interested in it, they're not going to put it on the market. They want to transfer it back to the mother church. I think probably most of the things that were in their possession or in kind of their local ownership group have already been dissolved and or transferred. So this would probably be one of the last assets that they have before they unfortunately cease to exist and merge with the other church. Next slide, please. So when we talked about this in executive session, we really talked about three options as we see them. You've got buy it, maintain it until the Army Corps gives us more information, because we don't have any of this information. We're kind of in this limbo. Buy it and tear it down. Don't buy it. We really kind of looked at it on a continuum of, you've got a little bit more control on one edge than you do on another edge of that continuum in terms of buy and remove, buy and hold, or don't buy at this time. So one of the options was buy it now and maintain it until we have more information from the Army Corps. If it's needed by the Army Corps, we can get federal credit for the purchase. So whatever purchase price, the $350 is what the purchase contract agreement is for. We would be reimbursed for that amount of money if it's needed for the Upper Turkey Creek project. If it's needed by the Corps project, we won't be painted in the bad light for the people that tore down that building. It just needs to happen for the protection of all the other businesses downtown that the Army Corps project aims to do. And we don't have to negotiate a higher sales price with a newer entity that would buy it. So again, I think it's important that we point out that if we don't buy it and it goes on the market, I don't know how long it would take for it to go back on the market from the mother church. But if someone were to purchase it and we ended up needing it, I don't know what we'll pay for it. We might pay more for it. There could be a holdout because we want the property. We could end up having to do eminent domain. We don't know what would happen, but that's simply a point that we need to make sure that we acknowledge, that we don't know what will happen. I think it's also important to point out that any business that comes in their due diligence process very likely would get familiar with the 2040 plan and the possibility of the creek bridge realignment, and very likely may not invest in the property. So the property may sit empty for several years, which might help with the price when we eventually need to buy it. But it could sit empty, or it could be bought as an investment property for someone to sit on it, to use it for purposes that aren't long-term, which may not be something that the city's interested in. But we don't know what'll happen. in that particular scenario. And then if we purchase it and it's not needed by the core project, then we can decide what's best at that location at that point in time, whether that's sell it, redevelop it, turn it into something for civic use. We have some control over it if we were to sit on it and just maintain it until that point. Next slide, please. Another option is buy it now and tear it down. Tear it down, I think, is an option that's a viable option. We discussed it. What we do, we would control absolutely what happens at that site or what doesn't happen at that site if we bought it and tore it down. We could avoid paying the cost of maintaining it. We will have to maintain this property if we buy it and keep it. We could buy it and tear it down in anticipation of the Corps needing it, and if the Corps does need it, we would get federal credit for it again. We could tear it down because the city has no identified need for the structure. I think it's important that we point out that in our conversations, we don't have a current use today for that. We're kind of sitting on it and squatting on it in hopes of what could come to be, what may come to be, very similar to what we did in the Dutch-made property. We could force future development at that site to be new development. If we tore it down and we were to put it out for development purposes because the Creek project doesn't need it, we would know it would be new development because there'd be nothing on that site. And then the last option would be to buy it, tear it down, simply because we don't want to confuse anyone that there is some grand plan for that property. Sitting on it for a while could imply that we have some sort of grand plan for it, and we currently don't. Not to say that we can't or we won't, but we currently don't. Again, these are summaries of past conversations that we've had. Next slide. And then don't buy it now. That's clearly a very viable option also. Don't buy it now. Why? Because we don't have a current use for it. We do not have a current use for it. We do not necessarily need it today with the information that we have. Don't buy it now because placing it on the market could lower the purchase price. We could maybe purchase it for less later. Again, I mentioned the fact that potential customers coming in, doing their due diligence, finding out that, hey, there's several things that could come to be, probably would drive the price of this down. I don't know that it would, but it could, because people wouldn't buy it because they don't know what it would be. Don't buy it, and if the Corps eventually needs it, we could attempt to buy it from whoever owns it at that point in time. It could be the mother church, it could be whoever, it could be somebody else that moves in there. We would get federal credit up to a limit. We have an appraisal that says it's worth $400,000. If somebody buys it and they jack the price up when we need it for the Corps project, we're only probably going to get $400,000 for it, not whatever we end up paying for it if we pay more than that. So that would be additional taxpayer money that we would need. Don't buy it now, and if it's not needed as part of the Corps project or 2040, we could allow the market to determine what's the highest and best use for it. Let it be what it's going to be. Or the last one is we just revisit the purchase at that time. Because again, I believe that the question mark that lingers over that property because of the 2040 plan, because of the Corps project, probably will make it very difficult to sell, at least to someone that's going to want to invest and improve it. It might be used for other uses that could be modified over the course of a couple of years, because if something were to come to be. So that would be another reason to not buy it now, is just to let it go, and we'll just come back at it at another date. So those were the three options that we discussed. I think there was a lot of good, robust conversation about should we not, what we would like to see, what we would not like to see, and ultimately the one common thread between, I believe, all of the council, or the majority of the council, is that we should buy it and we should hold it. No one was committed to tearing it down. No one was committed to letting it necessarily just fall into someone else's hands because of the proximity to 5701, because it is a gateway southbound into downtown historic Merriam, because of the investment we're putting in the street, because of the investment we're putting in the creek. I think the idea was that having control of that property, even to just maintain what's on it, and then in 2 or 3 years when we have more information, spit it back out onto the market. That was more or less kind of the common thread of the conversation we had. So walked out of that meeting and talked to the ownership group, negotiated a price. We have an appraisal, we have an Alta survey, we put together a contract that all parties have agreed upon for the purchase of that property for $350,000. We will also pay the closing cost on that. We have $250,000 encumbered, or about $250,000 encumbered from last year. We have a downtown project grant in CIP that is for odd things like this that might come up. We're going to fund the 5701 project out of that. So we have some funding that's actually designed for downtown enhancements that we could use that's towards this. So we have the funding if the council continues to go forward with the sale. That's the next slide. That being said, I'm happy to answer any questions about the process, any questions about the ownership group, or any questions in general.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Engel? I'm seeing no questions at this time. You've done a great job of.
Well, I should say, and we met in executive session twice, so yeah, we have had robust conversation. This was a summary of the conversation, so.
Well, assuming that no one has questions for you at this time, I mean, we do have the option of moving forward with this. I would open it up for, if someone would like to make a motion for whatever, if it's the purchase of the property or of one of those three options.
I'm
Okay,
ready
Ms.
to
Shadrich?
Okay. I'm ready to make this
Okay,
motion.
Ms. Hans, we'll go with you.
I move that the council approve a real estate contract for the purchase of 9224 West 57th Street in an amount not to exceed $400,000.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second? Ms. Shadrich?
Mr. Mayor, second.
Okay, we have a motion, second. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Leahy?
Aye.
Councilmember Neal?
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder?
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers?
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich?
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta?
Aye.
Councilmember Hands?
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, well, it looks like we're up to, well, we have Ms. Slocum coming forward here for Merriam 701 Merriam Drive discussion.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, Council. Happy New Year. I haven't seen many of you since the start of the new year. I'm here tonight before you to talk about the 5701 Merriam Drive project plan update and how we plan to proceed and kind of the history of how we've gotten to where we're at. Just as a reminder, the future of 5701, that discussion started with the Susan Richards Johnson study in 2015. So that's how long we've been discussing 5701, which led to a facilities master plan in 2017, which led to the creation of our 5701 committee. And this 5701 committee, as you will recall, was a group of individuals appointed by the mayor and approved by city council. Most of these members submitted an application to be chosen to serve and wanted to be involved from the get-go. But in addition, they had some unique expertise. Several are architects, some have design background, there's some engineering and planning. So this was a unique group of individuals that took charge of this process in 2018. So what that timeline looked like is in the fall of 2018, we had the approval process by the mayor and city council. And at our first meeting in December of 2018, the group decided that we should hire a consultant. It was felt that in the best time of the committee that we had someone that would hold us more accountable to the final recommendation. So we hired Collins, Notice and Associates, along with Confluence, and they led the committee meetings. The committee meetings started in March through July, and they were very busy meetings, and we did a lot of work through those meetings. To ensure a successful process, the group established some goals and strategies to use to define a successful outcome. When ideas for design were discussed, there were also some standards to which they were used to hold us accountable to determine if they were going to be feasible. These goals that I switched to a little too quickly, sorry, were additional goals established, and there was a time At this time, there were many things on the table. We weren't sure what was going to happen with 5701, so we wanted to make sure all of our options were open, including at that time, we weren't even sure if we were going to retain the property. So as you can tell, the goals that the committee came out with were to maximize, to minimize the cost. We wanted to make a decision now on what the design should look like, and city should keep the property, and whatever was should be the greatest for the community. So those were kind of the goals as we move forward in design. So in 2019, after the meetings, in August, a final report was presented to City Council. That was accepted at that August 2019 meeting, and in this report, there was a recommended concept. As you can tell, in that concept, the 1911 event space was recommended to be kept, pending the outcome of a structural study. So moving forward with that, we wanted to kind of evaluate if there was a reason to keep the 1911, if it could be kept, if it stood by itself. So in January of 2020, we hired SFS Architecture to do a structural assessment. The final report was presented in April of 2020. This was a 67-page report that reviewed the existing conditions of the structural, architectural, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems that were residing in the building, and what would need to happen because none of those really existed in the 1911 building. They were in all the other parts of that building, as you may recall. The findings of the report did not support retaining the 1911 section. In May of 2020, the building had to be vacated. It wasn't because MCC was ready, the building failed. We lost the fire system, we had plumbing issues, there was no water, and we lost the HVAC. City staff was relocated to the CIP section upstairs while we awaited the completion of MCC in July of 2020. In the fall of 2020, the building was demolished and leaves us to where we're at today. So that is how we got to where we're at today, and a lovely 5-acre piece of green space that we're trying to decide what our next steps are. So with the completion of the PSP studies that have concluded, and Merriam Drive redevelopment will be occurring in 2023, there is funding in the CIP for the design of 5701. And with additional funding for construction in 2024. So what do staff see as the next steps for 5701? Our next steps would be to reengage the 5701 committee in the winter of 2023. So preceding this, or after this meeting, sending an email out to those members, seeing if they're ready to reengage. They've received several emails over the course of the last several years from city administrator in regards to what's occurring on the property. So we'd like to reengage them, see if they're ready to reengage, trying to determine a date for a future meeting, and if additional members are needed if people decide they don't want to reengage. As in the original committee, we would work to create an RFP. That RFP would focus on a landscape design architect and what the qualities we would need to secure a successful candidate for that. With that, we would work to identify a selection committee to review and recommend a landscape architect with the hopes that we would bring a selection to City Council for approval in late spring, early summer of this year. As we did with the 5701 committee before, we would work to finalize the design with public input meetings so that we kind of like with the community center, we bring ideas forward, we hear input, we make changes based on that, and then bring that final design to City Council for approval in late 2023. Upon approval of that, we would then proceed with a construction RFP and a selection process to proceed with the final design, with the goal that in 2024, we would be construction and ribbon cutting at some time in 2024, as outlined in the CIP plan. So that is the timeline that we're looking forward to moving forward with on this project. I'd be happy to answer any questions or discussion that you have in regards to how we're planning to move forward at this time.
Questions for Director Slocum? Okay, yes, Ms. Shadrich.
What would the selection process look like for replacing the members who were on the committee that are current council members? Or would we do some shifting? For how that
My
would work?
understanding is that we would move forward with them as existing members of the committee. We would just, if they want to stay engaged, I'm not thinking that we were planning on replacing them. We would just have to notice the meeting differently because of quorum issues.
So we would essentially have like 4 council member liaisons, or they would just be committee members,
It would
and then
be-
we would have 2 liaisons?
Probably, that, we haven't really gone into that in depth,
We were-
but we'd wait
We
and
were
see who wants
committee
to be.
members before,
Yeah.
Okay.
as council people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because with new council members, and I think with it being in our ward, Amy and I had discussed we might like to be involved as well. So when you guys get to that process, I think just let us know.
And I believe, because of where we're already standing with the number of council members, there was maybe some assumption on my part that because we have to notice it already, we'd probably have more engagement of the council in general, whether you're serving as a committee member or attending the meeting to provide input.
Other questions for Director Slocum? Mr. Neal?
Yeah, I know this is maybe a little bit sideways, but the issue that was brought up earlier in the public comments section, the roadway changes and the decision to exclude the third lane, what would the impact be to or is there any kind of connection between the idea of putting an amphitheater on 5701 and the parking and some of the issues regarding that? Did that have any impact? And is that something that we can consider, or, I mean, are we too far down the road?
Well, we only have a recommended concept. We don't really have a full design. And so when we go in design, we're going to be looking at what's recommended for Merriam Drive. We're going to be looking at what's part of the Turkey Creek project, the core project, what that design is going to look like. So, and then we're going to be looking at the 2040 plan as well. So all of those plans will have to go into consideration when we look at what the final design of that property is going to be. Because obviously at this point, if the Turkey Creek plan goes through, that's going to change some of that design concept that was created in 2018. So I'm kind of roundabout answering your question in regards to, while we don't have a final design, all of those things have to be looked at when you go to design.
I guess what I was trying to get at was, just off the top of your head, is there some, from the work that we've done over the last several years, I mean, I think that originally the amphitheater use for that property was in some stuff that I saw back, or I've seen back in 2014. So it's been, the idea's been around for a long time, so there's probably been some thought given to the traffic in the roadway. And so are there any, I guess I'm a little bit concerned, again, that there's, that whatever process we go through is fully engages, everybody, and that we don't have a lot of surprised either residents or business owners from, what comes out of the process, that's all.
Well, and I mean, we do have in the timeline that we were going to do our best to engage the public. So besides maybe personally knocking on their door, inviting them, and we will go through our channels to make sure people are aware that there are design meetings and there's input being sought for this design. But in regards to some of the parking on 5701, I know that's being addressed in Merriam Drive. So some of this was done in correlation with what's already in those plans. So before we have a final concept to be approved, we will do our best to make sure that we have as much community input as we can in the process to avoid surprise.
Well, one of the things we do have available is we do have some polling tools that we fought hard for, And I hope that, I wish that they had been used sooner, and I hope that we take advantage of some of those in this process, if appropriate.
We will do our best, and I know we all learned things from past projects, so hopefully we take and use those learning experiences moving forward.
Yes, Mr. Silvers.
Thank you for presenting this tonight. I just had a question in regards to the timeline. It seems like a somewhat aggressive timeline, not knowing what's going on with the Corps' plan. Do you see any issue with meeting and discussing design and then having the Corps' plan affect that?
So in conversations and creating this timeline, while it does seem aggressive, we have a good idea of what the core plan is currently. And so as we go through design, we can overlay that on the property and design accordingly, so that if something does come, we could have an identified, okay, if the core comes through, this landscape can come out. Or if it doesn't come through, we can have it be landscape with an identified future use that we could then use kind of like as a master plan for final development. So working through that process, I think we would be okay, whichever way the Corps chooses to proceed with that project. Does that provide?
Thank you. Yeah.
And while it's a aggressive timeline, we all know that Mother Nature is not always our friend. Things come up. I work better if I have deadlines. And so if I set the deadline, then I know what I'm working towards. So I made the deadlines.
Ms. Shadrich, go ahead.
I want to echo your sentiment, Jason, in that we'll know in 2024 what this design looks like for the Turkey Creek project, right? We'll know more this June, right? Yeah, that's what I was saying. Okay, so this timeline actually does make sense with that design.
Yeah, we can make sure that any possibility of the things that we're currently talking about with the creek, we don't put permanent structures in those.
Right, I just don't want to spend the money to get it designed and reassemble the committee and then have the feds come back and say, we decided to redesign it again. And, okay, great, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure who this question goes to, but I think before we start down this path of getting this committee going again and working on this design, are we fully committed to retaining this property as a city asset? Or is there still some idea that it could be a commercial property? I mean, is what we're saying that this is going to be a city-owned asset that we're going to develop? Have we ever decided that?
If you're asking staff, the answer is yes. That's the direction that we believe we have.
Didn't previous council agree to retain it?
Yeah, have we ever decided that? Is that in the public record
so
that
like
we've
in-
decided to own this as a city property?
That was
Yeah,
a
it
recommendation.
It was one of the goals that she went over 5 or 6 slides
Yeah,
ago.
it was,
I know it's a recommendation, but have we ever firmly decided that?
you accepted
Council
the,
accepted the plan.
Before you were on council.
Okay.
It was the council when it was presented in 2019. So it
Okay.
was like when you and I were running.
Okay.
When they presented the design.
Okay.
As the former chairperson of that committee, we presented it at the August 2019 meeting. I presented it to the previous council.
Okay, I just don't want to get down this road and somebody say, hey, let's make this a development. It'd be a great apartment complex.
Well, just for a little background, part of the nature of the design at that site was that if that was something that was ever presented 20 years down the road, again, we don't have structure, we don't have things that are not easy to move out of the way should we decide that that's what we want.
Okay.
If somebody were to come in and say, hey, I'd like to build whatever there, and it made sense to the community, you know, we're talking about flower gardens and playgrounds, right? I mean, and even though we call it an amphitheater, we're really talking about a pavilion. So none of those things, if for some reason someone were to approach us, or 20 years, 30 years down the road, we decide that that might be what we want, it wouldn't be such of an intensive use that we couldn't transition it.
So it shall be a park.
Unless this body tells us it's not going to.
Okay,
And we'll know more when the design committee reassesses it.
okay. I'm good with that. I'm just want to make sure.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Any other questions for Director Slocum? Yep, Mr. Silvers.
I also just want to remind everyone that in that discussion in 2019, we talked about whether the city should build something there, and the council agreed that we didn't want the city to be a landlord. So build space that could be rented out to other businesses. And that's why, one reason I feel like we all landed on the fact that we wanted it to stay a green space that could be developed later when we had more time to decide how to use it.
Thank you. Mr. Neal.
One other thing, there was substantial sentiment in the original committee to do something with the historic 1911 building, and it is now no longer there. So there are things about that plan that the community agreed to that are no longer applicable. So, that you have to kind of look at it from that perspective as well, that it's a plan that is no longer in total doable.
Okay. No more questions?
Do you need anything from us besides a head nod that we think reengaging the committee is a wonderful idea?
That is what I'm looking for, is just a head nod that you're ready for us to proceed with this as recommended in the CIP plans and move forward with
And
that
then
process.
the only other thing I would say is when you reengage the former members, then the mayor can review the makeup of the committee and decide who is underrepresented and
Yes.
what we need to do.
Yes, once we know who's ready to reengage, then we will follow through with that process, report back, kind of set up we want to have a first meeting once we kind of get through that process. So we'll talk offline and figure out what our next steps are to make sure that we're moving forward correctly.
That's great.
All right.
Thanks.
No, I'm assuming that we might want to reach out to the public, see if there's anybody that wasn't on the original committee that maybe he's now moved into our community, or, besides just the current members that we have. I don't know, we want to add a whole lot more people to it, but there may be some interest out there that hasn't come forward yet.
So would you like to see who's not, the committee is already several members deep. Would you like us to at least reach out to the original committee, see who wants to reengage? If there is no reengagement, that if somebody decides not to reengage, then we go back out before or do you want us to do that in tandem?
Well, I don't want it to become unwieldy as far as the size of that committee, but, I don't know if there was one or two people to come forward that could still be added, that.
I personally would not do an open call until you've already
Yeah, I think we need to know how many
reengaged.
people are
Okay.
going to reengage first. That's probably the first step, so.
Okay.
Did we get a head nod from everybody? I forgot to be looking. Yes. Okay. Well,
All
a
right.
head nod.
So we'll
Yes,
start with
that's
that
great.
process, and then once we get some information back, we'll reach back out at least
Yeah.
through
Mr.
Chris or
Engel.
something.
Yeah,
Okay?
that'd be fine.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Slocum. Okay. All right. Well, looks like maybe the next item up is the CIP update. We have Street Superintendent Randy Fine. Mr. Fine, what do you have for us?
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Happy New Year. I've got your January CIP update. First on the list, we've got 55th Street, which stretches from Merriam Drive to West City limits. I would say 99% of the curb has been completed. With the mild temperatures forecasted, the contractor's looking to do some driveway approaches on that south side. And then the pipelining, I was told just recently that they're looking to show up this week, so that's nice to get them working on that. And then Total Electric is on the home stretch of putting in the streetlight conduit for the new streetlights. Substantial completion date is May 31st. Next up, we have the storm lining improvement project, various locations, including Antioch and Knox. The contractor, Municipal Pipe Tool, the contract's been completely signed. And we're looking to have a pre-construction meeting this Friday to discuss scheduling and get this project going. Next is Merriam Drive street improvements. This is from Johnson Drive to 55th. We're in the final stages of design. We met with staff, BHC, last Thursday. Had a good discussion, a lot of small details we're trying to iron out still. Plan to go to bid sometime, hopefully at the end of this month. Lastly, we have 50th Terrace, England to Kessler drainage project. This will include stormwater infrastructure upgrades. I guess a better description is 47th Terrace at the north end down to Brown Park where it enters the creek. We had a kickoff meeting last Thursday as well. You should probably expect to see some survey crews in the next couple weeks, kind of just checking things out. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Fine? Oh, yeah, got lots of hands coming up here. Okay, Ms. Shadrich, go ahead first.
No, I just wanted to say good job, as always, with the snow and everything over the holidays.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Silvers?
I'd like to second that. I'd also like to just correct something I said at our last meeting. I had felt like there had been some cut-ins in the 55th Street roadway that actually you were exactly right. It was just raising the manhole covers. I think it was the spatter from the cutting that when driving the speed limit, chief, down that road, it just looked a little larger than it actually was, but it looks great.
Good.
Thank you.
Good.
Any other questions, Mr. Fine? Okay, thanks, Superintendent Fine. Okay. Well, let's see, it looks like monthly finance report. All right. We have Director Oliver's coming up.
Good evening. I'm here with the November finance report. Ordinarily, you would have got that in December, but since we only had one meeting, we're going to do it tonight. One change in the finance report, I had a request to kind of include some additional TIF information. And so if you look at the page that has the questions on it, you'll see at the bottom that we've added 2 question and answers in regards to the TIF funds. And so we added a question about what's the current balance in the fund, and then one about what are the outstanding obligations. And so I'm hoping that kind of provides a little more transparency in that area. And if that doesn't address it, then please let me know, and we certainly can do some other things as well. Okay, good deal. Finance right now is getting busy. Our auditors did their first walkthrough last week, and so we're getting all of our work papers together and getting ready for that fund. So I would entertain any questions that you might have about the report.
Looks like we're making money. That's
We have continued to see good sales
Return.
tax numbers, and
yeah, good to
happy
do
with
that.
that,
Any
so-
questions for Director Oliver?
okay.
Wow, okay.
Thank you very much.
Keep that money coming in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, no problem. And obviously, much like with this, if there's any type of recurring information that you're not currently getting, we are more than open to adding a piece in there. So just let me know if something like that comes up. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Engel, we have any additional staff items that you'd like to cover?
You covered most of them with your report, Mayor. The only two that I have is the Chamber is hosting a trivia night over at our Merriam Community Center on February 16th. You can register as an individual or a team. If you'd like to register as a team, please coordinate that with Jennifer so we can get the team registered. This is the first time that the Chamber's ever done this, but since it's in our own backyard, thought it was important to let everybody know. And then the other one is we have some additional information on the OPFD Awards and recognition ceremony that'll be coming up, on February 18th. It's at the Overland Park Community Center, our Convention Center, at 6000 College Boulevard. That's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, programs at 3:30. That's actually a very, very good event. Mayor's been there. I think Councilmember Hands have been there. Again, OPFD is our fire department, and they do fantastic work for us. If we have the opportunity to attend, I would highly recommend that event. It is a very impressive ceremony.
And that's an RSVP event?
That is an
Contact Jennifer
RSVP
for
event
that.
with them. However, if anyone wants to reach out to myself or Jennifer, anybody in staff, we can make sure that we pass on that you will be there. Again, as elected officials, I'm sure you'll be feted in some sort of special way up at some special table.
Okay.
Happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
Ms. Shadrich, go ahead.
I actually just have a comment, if that's okay. Today is National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. So Darren, we appreciate you and everything the force does.
Did you get any extra donuts, Chief? Did you get any extra donuts today, or? No, you didn't.
It's funny because police officers like donuts. Yeah. No, thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Engel or anyone else? Okay, hearing none, I guess we would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, Ms. Hans, go ahead.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion, second. Ms. Shadrich,
Mr. Mayor, second.
Madam Clerk.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Meeting's adjourned.